message, texting on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, Rachel Reeves. Well, she tells us she's an experienced economist, but has she been economical with the truth? Folks, can you jump me to the top of the script? This would be lovely to have some great live telly, please. There you go. The Chancellor will get the truth on that in a special big opinion. Also, folks, can you just jump me to the top of the script, please, folks, because it's very important that we know where we are in the show. OK, now look at this as a big story. Anger as record numbers of asylum seekers claiming to be gay are allowed to stay in Britain under ECHR rules will get reaction. And in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, I'll be exposing the scandal of huge numbers of construction workers taking their own lives. This country would be nothing without its builders. And I'll be joined in the studio by two of these brave heroes who'll be sharing their moving and painful stories. And in an hour's time in My Take at 10, a year on from his stint on I'm a Celebrity, and now Nigel Farage is facing the snakes and reptiles of British politics. I'll be explaining why Nigel Farage is Britain's most important politician and why eventually he will be king of the political jungle. Plus, tonight's top pundits, we have editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, historian and fellow of the Danube Institute, David Oldroyd-Bolt, and political commentator and former Labour Party prospective parliamentary candidate, Susie Stride. 2 hours of big debate, big opinion and big entertainment. In just a moment, has Rachel Reeves been economical with the truth about her past as an economist and why it matters to you and me? First, the news headlines and the highly qualified Sophia Wensler.
Mark, thank you and good evening. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom at 9 o'clock. Joe Biden's administration has lifted the ban on Ukraine using US weapons to strike deep inside Russia. It's understood Ukraine plans to conduct its first long-range attacks in the coming days. The US U-turn comes after months of requests by Volodymyr Zelensky to allow Ukraine's military to use US weapons. It's not clear if Donald Trump will reverse Biden's decision when he takes office. Trump has long criticised the scale of US financial and military aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has no plans to speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin, as he said we need to double down on support for Ukraine. The Prime Minister pledged that Ukraine was top of his agenda at this week's G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters that there's got to be full support as long as it takes. In other news, the Prime Minister has hinted that the UK will start paying countries to do more to stop migrants entering the UK illegally. It comes amid reports the government is expected to announce an Italian-style immigration deal with countries like Kurdistan and Vietnam. The Times reports the Home Secretary is preparing to pay millions of pounds to countries to fund more preventative measures, stopping migrants from journeying to Britain. Despite scrapping the Conservatives' flagship Rwanda plan, Labour is said to be modelling their immigration policy on that of Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's deal with Albania. When asked directly about paying countries to stop migrants leaving their countries and heading to the UK, Sir Keir Starmer said anything else we can do to stop people leaving in the first place is the right thing. Now, an international manhunt is underway for the husband of a woman who was murdered and found in the boot of a car. 24-year-old Harshita Brella was discovered in London last Thursday after police received a call from a member of the public concerned for her welfare. Police are now searching for Harshita's husband, Pankaj Lamba, but he is thought to have fled the country. A mandatory referral has been made to the Independent Office for Police Conduct by Northamptonshire Police because of previous contact with Miss Brella. Now, it's being reported that ministers are drawing up contingency plans to deal with food shortages if farmers go on strike over the Treasury's inheritance tax rate on farms. Thousands of farmers from across the country are descending on London this week. It's in objection to the government plans that will see farming assets worth more than £1 million hit with a 20% inheritance tax. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Well, in my take at 10 in an hour's time, a year on from his stint on I'm a Celebrity, now Nigel threatens to be the king of the political jungle. But we start with my big opinion. Good evening. Oh dear, it's been reported by the excellent Guido Fawkes website that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves lied on her CV, claiming to have been an economist at Halifax Bank when it turns out she worked in the complaints department. Well, getting angry complaints is something she'll need to get used to, given her budget for growth has proved about as unpopular as a Prince Andrew backstage meet and greet. After all, Rachel Reeves has enraged 10 million pensioners by axing their winter fuel payments, enraged farmers with an inheritance tax raid, and enraged business with a hike on employer national insurance contributions, which the boss of Deutsche Bank this week called a payroll tax, which may lead to 100,000 workers facing unemployment. But apart from the terrible policies, Starmer and Reeves's great crime is actually talking down the economy, with doom and gloom pre-budget, all for political purposes, and claims of a £20 billion black hole, which is proving more elusive than the Loch Ness Monster. All this negativity has now hit the economy, with new figures this week revealing that growth has dropped from 0.5% under Rishi Sunak in the summer, the highest in the G7, to 0.1% under Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. If only this government had a complaints department like the Halifax do. Now, in my big opinion last month, I said that duplicity and dishonesty are a key feature of this new administration. And the plot thickens as the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, faces a fresh headache today as the Telegraph report that she's been accused of exaggerating the length of her service working at the Bank of England. In a 2021 interview for Stylist magazine, to which I subscribe, obviously, she said she'd spent a decade working as an economist at the Bank of England and, quote, loved it. However, on LinkedIn, a networking website where you show your career history, it lists only a 6-year period of service at the bank from September 2000 to December 2006. That's not a decade, is it? With political advisor Henry Newman suggesting a year of that was spent as a student. Now, this is just days after the Chancellor's LinkedIn page was edited to change her job title at the Bank of Scotland from economist to retail banking, which I think means giving bags of pound coins to shopkeepers, exchanging holidaymakers' currency and handing out those free blue pens. Now, this story may seem trivial. After all, my CV says that I'm 28, have a swimmer's build and played Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. But a pattern is emerging. This is the same Chancellor that said that she did not anticipate raising tax on working people and has done just that with the aforementioned payroll tax, something that the respected and politically neutral Paul Johnson of the IFS has said will likely impact workers via lower wages, cancelled bonuses and potentially layoffs. Honesty in politics is important, and Reeves and her ilk were all too keen to point that out during the last administration. They gave Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak dog's abuse over these issues. So, an online archive shows that in 2009, when Rachel Reeves, our first woman Chancellor, how embarrassing for women, was campaigning to be an MP, her website said the following, and this is the kicker. Rachel has spent her professional career as an economist, working for the Bank of England, the British Embassy in Washington and at Halifax, Bank of Scotland. Oh dear, the Chancellor is an economist, all right, an economist with the truth. Are you concerned about these revelations of the Chancellor's past? Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But first, tonight's top pundits, historian and fellow of the Danube Institute, David Oldroyd-Bolt, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and former Labour prospective parliamentary candidate, Susie Stride. Great to see all three of you. Charlotte, let me start with you. Welcome back to the show. Is this a big political problem for Rachel Reeves?
I think so, because for me, I was very bought into that goody two-shoes, honest, school mistressy Rachel Reeves. And all that negativity, by the way, dealing with complaints, have clearly worn off on her because she was so doom and gloom. But I did buy into it. I thought, this is an honest politician and she's just warning us it's going to be tough.
Grown-ups back in charge?
Yeah, a little bit of that. And then now, of course, we know she's just lying on her CV, just like the rest of us, I suppose, have done at one point or another, especially you.
Correct.
But she's not
true about Luke Skywalker,
two
by the way,
shoes.
and the swimmer's bill. I'll show you later. David, I'll show you later anyway.
Thank you.
No, far from being Mrs. Schoolmistress Goody Two-Shoes, she fibs on her CV, and of course everything she promised, it has come to be the opposite. Of course she's raiding taxes left, right, and centre.
I mean, David, being parsimonious with the truth on a CV is not crime of the century, but talking the economy down so that growth goes from 0.5% in July to 0.1% today, that is a problem.
As is inventing a £20 billion black hole, which the OBR has repeatedly said there is no evidence to show has ever existed, whether as a consequence of the last Conservative government or indeed as a consequence of Miss Reeves' rather stupid budget. The problem is that she's not very good at being the Chancellor because, as we now know, she's got about as much economic experience as the table in front of us. And I think this shows a big problem with the Labour Party, as it always seems to happen with Labour governments. They're not very good at telling the truth about themselves and their experience, and they're not very good at government once they get to it. The great exception was Gordon Brown, because he was a trained economist who malign as I think his influence on the economy was, did actually know what he was doing and how to achieve it. But that's an unusual thing. And I think Ms Reeves is just putting herself in the pantheon of useless Labour chancellors.
OK, please don't be rude about the table. This is IKEA's finest. Money's been spent, let me tell you. The problem is that Rachel Reeves, Susie, is not going to be part of the furniture for much longer, is she? She's on borrowed time now.
I mean, I just don't agree. I'm sorry, I don't see this as a big deal.
Go. How dare you?
I don't see this as a big deal. And I'm also a little bit like, how are we being lectured? I'm just feeling Robert Jenrick trying to throw mud at Rachel Reeves. I mean, I'm not going to forget about Robert Jenrick because it was my area where they tried to build a massive development because he did a dodgy deal with Richard Desmond. And then Boris Johnson was like, well, you know, you're too scandalous, I'm kicking you out. So you got him lectured. And then Liz Truss. I mean, even the Times today, a right-wing newspaper, as far as I'm concerned, though I do subscribe to it, you know, they're criticising Liz Truss for what she did on the budget and the fact that she did not take advice on the economic advice that was given to her. And I'm just like, the Tories are trying to lecture us. Now, on the budget, this is what I would say. We are 3 weeks off that budget. 3 weeks off. Let's see what happens over the next couple of years. All I'm saying is this, and I would bet, though I'm not a betting person, but I would happily bet that when Labour, in 5 years' time, when we go to the general election, this country's going to be in a better place. Kids are not going to be in porter cabins, as they were under the Tories. We're not going to have record waiting lists. And this is the thing. People keep saying this and saying that, but we have to raise money from somewhere. Healthy economy, you need healthy schools and a healthy NHS. And the Tories left it in a state.
OK, now, we can't verify those allegations about Robert Jenrick. You're entitled to your view, but he's not here to defend himself.
Dream on.
I'd like you to defend a correction downwards of growth from 0.5% in July to 0.1% today.
I mean,
how has that progressed?
Interestingly, the one thing I would agree with you on is this. I mean, I think it is so important to be positive and to not be all, you know, and it's really funny because I think Patrick interviewed me in the summer and I look back on the interview and it makes me laugh so much because I think they were being a bit gloomy. You know, and
for political reasons.
Well,
you think they were leveraging the bad news?
There's two things. There's two things here. Number one, the day after that budget, I listened to that budget, OK, and I literally came up and listened to that budget. I was going on a lovely countryside walk. It was half term, and I was like, I felt so excited. I was like, yes, we're going for investment, you know. And I just saw the papers the next day, and it was just negative, negative, negative. And all I can say is, I'm sorry, but the press in this country have got a lot to answer for.
Negative.
A lot to answer for.
Were the press wrong to be negative? Were you wrong to be negative?
No, what happened was 2 days later you hear the truth come out because the press have held her to account, drilled down, and like you were saying, it turns out it was all very duplicitous. And, you know, we're now finding out that actually pretty much every farmer is going to have to pay IHT tax, not just a select few wealthy farmers.
Upwards of 60%.
I mean, it's insane. And all this comes out in the fullness of time. So, yeah, of course, I'm sure you skipped out of the budget thinking, what a happy day. But when the actual facts emerge, you think, oh, my God, this is a disaster.
I mean, for me, I think the facts of this budget, I mean, no one can judge. It would be madness to judge a budget 3 weeks, 4 weeks later.
But you're not worried about a budget, though, a budget for growth, the budget, what is it, the Office of Budget Responsibility said will lower growth in the years ahead.
This is what I feel excited about. We've got 63 billion
and
investment.
Inflation's going to go up as well.
We've got 63.
You keep talking about investments. Sorry, it's not investments. It's spending taxpayers' money. That's not investment. Investment is when you build a business and you expand your workforce, you make profits, and then you reinvest that profit. What you're talking about is taxing people who are already taxed more than they've ever been taxed in our nation's history, and then spending that money, which doesn't actually exist.
On themselves.
Thereby layering debt. We are already more indebted than we've ever been. At what point does the Labour Party stop believing in this mad, warped form of Keynesianism and realise it doesn't work?
I mean, look, anywhere we are this day and any criticism people want to levy at the economy at the moment, I mean, that is 14 years of the Tories. Sorry, I'm going to say it, because you can't judge. We've been in government for 4 months. I mean...
You can judge the plans you put forward
talk to any economist.
Talk
to any economist, and they're going to say to you, you cannot judge what's going on in the economy right now on the last 4 months. That's just not the way it works. However, this is what I am going to say. I don't have a problem, and I'm happy to be the unpopular one in the room. I don't have a problem levying taxes against wealthy people. Sorry, I've dedicated 20 years dedicated 20 years of my life to working with poor kids. I've seen a different side of life. Not me personally, but the kids I've served. And I don't mind, you know, wealthy people in this country paying a little bit more. I do have a concern, 100%, and I've said this on this show a few weeks ago. I do have a concern that if farmers are being hit, but my understanding, I mean, it's very interesting. BBC Radio 4, who, you know, I wouldn't say they're particularly left-wing. I'd say who knows where they are. You can never judge from these people. Well, you know, put them as left-wing as you want. Someone was saying that the Guardian's left-wing. I was like, the Guardian just balmy to me. But anyway, they were saying only 500 farmers can be affected. Now, look, I am not an expert on this.
NFU disagree with that.
Well, maybe. And for me, the farmers, I mean, I'm not a farmer and I'm not an expert in this area. However, for me, I would be concerned, if it is going to affect small family farms. However, the idea behind this policy was actually, in some ways, and again, you guys are going to probably not like me for saying this, but it was about actually protecting farmers, because it was saying we're going to tax these wealthy people that come in, buy up farming land, and then sell it off.
Charlotte, last word.
Well, the reason why, her intentions have failed is because she's not an economist and she's certainly not a farmer. I don't think she's ever left London.
And how many entrepreneurs are there in the cabinet?
Oh,
I don't think there's one. I think you've got Lord Timpson, who's a Justice Minister. Yeah. And that's about it. They're career politicians, lawyers and all the rest of it. Briefly, though, is this a crisis of the Tories making? They're the ones that broke the economy, aren't they, Charlotte?
Well, no, because it was doing quite well under Rishi Sunak by the end and actually went down once Rachel Reeves took over as Chancellor.
I think if you ask working people, it wasn't going well.
It's a crisis of the entire political class.
But people, it's like the Democrats, they just lost because people on the ground were struggling.
OK.
Rishi Sunak can say what he wants.
It's a crisis of the entire political class that agreed with lockdowns and furloughs and the entirely crippling economic measures that didn't work, didn't save lives and have made people poorer.
OK,
I agree.
We'll return to this for the papers at 10:30 because you can see that the panel feels strongly on these issues. But first up, time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. That's a whopping 36 grand in tax-free cash. Here's how you win it. Coming up in the big story, anger as record numbers of asylum seekers claiming to be gay are allowed to stay in Britain under ECHR rules. We'll get reaction next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recruiters are warning that if you're not tech-savvy, you could be missing out with your CV failing to make it through an AI-powered sifting process. So we've gone from sort of computer says no HR people ticking boxes to AI, right? Is that right?
Yes, well, this applies once you're in the job as well, as a recent report revealed that employees expect AI will manage an average of a third of their tasks within the next 12 months. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Cosmo Curry, founder of Van Kuysen, a leading company in technology recruitment.
Morning, Cosmo.
Morning.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Ben.
Well, yeah, thank you for joining us. It's very interesting, isn't it? Because AI is, of course, on the rise and now in the workplace and in universities and things. Another article came to mind. There was a student recently, I think it was in the news just the other day, that got in trouble for using AI. So there's for exam purposes and essays. So there's lots of different ways that it can be a good thing and a bad thing. But you're, of course, here to talk about the ways in which AI is a good thing within the workplace.
Absolutely. I mean, AI is here to stay, for sure. And we're seeing this rise of people using it in such a clever format. And the other side of it is also we're seeing people who are using it and during the process of that, they are losing their character. We're losing the actual insight into the individual behind that. And so we've kind of got this kind of mix. And I think AI is phenomenal when you're looking at it from a point of view of optimization, point of view of speed, getting results. But I think we have to remember that the fundamental of recruitment is people. And we cannot substitute the people, the personal aspect, by replacing that with AI.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, folks, it's time now for the big story. And this is quite a story. The Telegraph newspaper report a record number of asylum seekers claiming to be gay have been allowed to stay in Britain under ECHR rules. Cases made around sexual orientation rose to over 2,000 last year, up from 762 in 2022 and 677 the year before that. The Home Office granted the claims to stay after those seeking asylum proved that returning to their homeland would be inhumane because of their sexuality. The UK has accepted that people who would be criminalised or open to persecution because of their sexual orientation can claim asylum under the European Convention on Human Rights. Well, for reaction, I'm delighted to welcome the Research Director at the Migration Control Centre, Robert Bates. Robert, good to see you. I won't ask for your sexual orientation, although it could affect your citizenship. But listen, what a strange story this is. First of all, your reaction to those figures. Why has it jumped to over 2,000 people claiming to be gay this year?
Well, the reason why it's jumped is because the people smugglers and those involved in the trade have got wise to what actually fiddles the right dials and makes an asylum application more likely to be given the green light. So we see that homosexuality is one of those reasons that people often put on their asylum application as a reason to stay. We also see it with people claiming to be children, people claiming to be Christians, and we also have people claiming to be from different nationalities as well. So there's a real spate at the moment of people from Ethiopia claiming that they're from Eritrea, and the risk of being returned there, where it's a war-torn country, is too great and that they'd be put at risk. And this is precisely the kind of thing that is enabled because of the ECHR and because of the left-wing lawyers and ultimately the judiciary as well in this country that is far too keen to lap up these kind of lines, far too keen to believe these people, take these issues at face value. And we must also remember that we've got Home Office caseworkers at the moment are far too keen to press the green light on these issues. I think recent statistics that came out in the last month showed that about 50% of those granted asylum and those asylum cases that have been adjudged in the last year were not done to a proper standard. There were corners cut, there were decisions that were taken at a speed that wasn't appropriate, and as such we have a really creaking system that is awarding asylum far too easily to people, and that's exactly what these people are playing onto.
Can you really use the expression left-wing lawyers? Aren't these advocates who are simply upholding the rules and the law?
Well, you'd like to think so, but I think there's a level of judicial activism that is definitely taking place, and you see it with law firms such as Duncan Lewis Solicitors and those such that are, they never even pretend to have any degree of impartiality on this issue. They never pretend that they're just following the law, the letter of the law. They're on a crusade, and they're very keen to make sure everyone knows that they are there to rescue people and to advance these kind of liberal, these kind of open borders agendas. And you see it across the board.
I don't think there's any tangible evidence that Duncan Lewis or any of these outfits that have such an agenda or are activists, as you say. You're entitled to your view, but they're not here to counter that. I think they would argue that they're simply upholding the human rights of these individuals. But it is interesting that the number has gone so high. The issue that the courts have is that you can't prove someone's not gay, can you?
No, you can't, and obviously there is a process that has gone through to try and explore that issue, and you have actually found that some individuals purporting to be homosexuals have come a cropper on that stage because they have actually, not been prepared to.
Really,
go through
what is a gay test?
Well, I don't know what the test is.
You have to show them West Side Story, and if they start singing along, then they can stay.
All I know is that they are far too.
Liza Minnelli
they
CDs.
Find themselves on very uncomfortable terrain and aren't prepared to go down that route, and that is very indicative of the problem that is taking place here.
Indeed, Robert. The plot thickens because we've got another story that I want to tell you about, and you won't believe this, is arguably even more shocking. A paedophile convicted of sexually assaulting his stepdaughter has been allowed to remain in the UK as deporting him would breach his right to a family life. The decision was made despite the tribunal accepting that the man continues to pose a risk to the community, in particular to children. Robert, where do you start with that one?
Well, I mean, this would, in times gone by, have been a clean-cut case. This would have been a very simple case of this man is an absolute monster. He has done unspeakable things. We do not want him in the country. But he's obviously, as we well know by this point, not the first chap that has been committing heinous crimes, having come into the country illegally as well. And I don't think it makes me a particularly old-fashioned chap to say that I don't really want to live in a country where the kind of crimes that we're seeing committed, where we're having acid thrown in people's faces, we're having stepdaughters being sexually assaulted, we're having old people being assaulted, and the crisis that is leading to these events is going absolutely unsolved. I don't think it makes me old-fashioned to say that this is an absolute national disgrace.
What about these individuals? I mean, people talk about migrants and asylum seekers. They're human beings, aren't they? They've come from dangerous countries and they want to be safe, and they want to be safe in this country. What's the problem with that?
This man
Where's the empathy, Robert?
This man had his asylum application rejected, but because our Home Office and our processes are so ineffective, he was able to stay for another 5 years, and by that time he'd, fathered a couple of children, and he'd married a woman. So the case for him to stay by that point was irreconcilable. So I think we need to realise that, it's all too easy to fall into the trap of humanity and these vague notions of, oh, well, what does it say about us if we're prepared to turn people away if they're claiming that they're in jeopardy? The simple fact of the matter is, if people are coming into this country illegally, they should not be allowed to stay. We have rules and processes in place for a reason. And if people are prepared, the very first thing they do in this country is to ride roughshod over those, then that is not setting a very good example for what the rest of their future in the UK will be.
But do you take the point? I mean, I'm not going to defend that monster that attacked and sexually assaulted his own stepdaughter, but just in those other cases, 2,000 people claiming to be gay, maybe they are gay, maybe they would be persecuted if they went back. They are human beings. Where is the empathy?
Well, of course there's empathy, and I mean, people are obviously, the natural instinct is to try and make a better life for yourself, and I don't begrudge anyone for trying to do that. The problem is that we've got a system in the UK where people are able to take advantage of our generosity, and people are able to take advantage of our empathy, and they're able to break into our country, coming from safe countries such as France, and claim asylum here, be put up in 5-star hotels, 4-star hotels probably more likely, ultimately be given, very, very likely to be given refugee status, and then live a life in many cases on benefits.
Well, that's right. I mean, 90% of those asylum cases will probably be given the green light, and I think the cost of accommodating migrants in hotels at the moment is around £3 billion a year, which is a bigger budget than levelling up under Boris Johnson.
So overall, the whole asylum system is costing about £6 or £7 billion every single year being spent on the mess that is.
And what you're doing, obviously, you're creating competition for resources, aren't you?
Well, precisely. And then once you are... I mean, Keir Starmer is making a big deal about clearing the backlog, but what they are in fact doing is, by granting these people asylum, is they're hiding the costs within the larger welfare bill, because those people that are currently being put up in hotels, currently having recourse to public funds via kind of doctors and being put up in hotels and given taxpayers' money, they then get hidden within the wider welfare bill of claiming universal credit and claiming other kinds of benefits as well, because that's their right once they have refugee status.
Robert, is the ECHR overrated as a sort of silver bullet to fix all of this? Because, I mean, France deport people whilst being in the ECHR. Is this, is it a little bit of a mirage, the idea that all would be fixed if we ditched it?
No, it's an essential first step, and I think we see in Italy at the moment Meloni's plans to try and tackle their illegal migration crisis is running a cropper somewhat, because they are also members of the ECHR. I mean, there is a much, much bigger problem that lurks beneath the surface, but the ECHR leaving that is the very first step that needs to be taken.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in. I didn't find out your sexuality, but hey, the night is young. Folks, many thanks to Robert Bates, who is a very, very esteemed and knowledgeable chap. He is the the research director at the Migration Control Centre. Folks, a really busy few minutes to come. Nigel Farage is the subject of my take at 10. But next up, as a leading journalist is visited by police for an unkind tweet, is it time to scrap Britain's hate laws altogether? Plus, was Rishi Sunak's decision to call an early general election the biggest blunder in history? I'll be asking a top Tory insider live in the studio next.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's going to be turning colder for all of us as we head into the new working week with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us and plenty of blustery showers around as well. This is all thanks to this area of low pressure that's moving in from the northwest towards the UK as we go through into the start of Monday and Tuesday. Back to this evening though, a bit of a mixed picture across the UK, plenty of cloud, some outbreaks of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across the southern half of the UK, but further north staying a little bit drier, plenty of clear spells around, some blustery showers across the far north of Scotland, these likely to turn to sleet and snow over the hills, and it'll be a really chilly start to the morning across parts of Scotland, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places. So this could mean some icy stretches, so do take care during Monday morning's rush hour. But further south, a bit of a milder start to the morning, plenty of showery rain around, this perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, generally a bit of a drier start to the day though, some sunny spells as we go through the morning. But for Scotland, despite the bright start, it will be a really chilly start, so do take care if you are on the roads during Monday morning's rush hours. There could be some ice on some untreated surfaces. Those sleet and snow showers continue to pile in across northern parts of Scotland throughout all of Monday, and that initial area of rain across the southern areas clears away to the south, but this next area of rain arrives across parts of Northern Ireland, most likely falling as rain, but we could see some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through Monday afternoon. Some sunny spells across eastern areas through the afternoon, but feeling really quite chilly here. Temperatures only around 2 or 3 degrees, but just holding on to that milder air further south. To start on Tuesday, we could see some disruptive snow across northern parts of England, most likely falling over high ground, but there is a chance that we could see sleet and snow to lower levels, so do take care if you are out on Tuesday morning. But Tuesday afternoon, there should be plenty of sunny spells around, but still plenty of blustery showers, particularly across the northern half of the UK, and it will be feeling cooler as we go towards the middle part of the week, with temperatures well below average for the time of year.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nigel Farage is the topic of my take at 10. You won't want to miss it. But first, the new leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, has said that hate crime laws must be reviewed to protect free speech after police launched an investigation into Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson over a tweet. The Conservative leader said it was absolutely wrong for the police to visit any journalist's home simply because they'd expressed an opinion. She challenged Sir Keir Starmer to show that he believed in free speech by examining the laws around so-called non-crime hate incidents. Well, tonight the Prime Minister has spoken out, saying that the police should concentrate on tackling crime. So has Britain turned into a hellish, dystopian version of 1984? Let's get the views of former Conservative MP and Government Minister Paul Scully. Paul, really good to see you again.
Really good to see you.
Are you concerned about these developments, stories like Alison Pearson being visited by cops on Remembrance Sunday about a historic tweet?
I really am. I really am. I think it's the thin end of the wedge. You know, a lot of politicians, when they get asked this, serving politicians, ministers and the like, they'll always say, well, I don't have the details, so I can't really comment. The thing is, Alison Pearson doesn't have the details. She literally doesn't know which tweet she was purported to have talked about or retweeted, messaged or whatever like that. To get a knock on the door, no matter how strong you are, how strident you are, that's really, really unnerving.
Indeed. And the thing is, Alison, in a sense, is lucky because she's a high-profile figure and she can use her platform at the Telegraph to actually talk about this and draw attention to this seeming injustice and this overreach. But there are many ordinary people who also get a visit from Plod because of a Facebook post, a tweet or some other public utterance.
No, absolutely. I think Chris Philp was talking this morning about a report that a 9-year-old had a similar sort of experience. I mean, what are we coming to, honestly, when police are being taken away from investigating actual crimes to look at things that they haven't got a clue whether it's crime. The person doesn't know what they're talking about. This really, as I say, is the thin end of the wedge, and we've got to just nip it in the bud now.
And how has this happened on the watch of the Conservatives, who you would think stand for free speech?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I can't rewind it and work out where because I think we introduced the code of conduct, how it's going to get reported and these things back in about 7 or 8 years ago, but clearly started happening under our watch. And whether it's because we were looking the other way and not focusing on it, whether it was trying to answer a different problem, and it's because it's so much of politics is about the unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So it's incumbent on ministers or opposition to say, you know what, we got it wrong, this has got to stop.
Most definitely. Did Rishi Sunak get it wrong, calling an election in July? One of his former top advisors, it's reported in the papers today, urged him not to go to the country in July. Will he rue the day he did?
I don't know if he'll rue the day, but I think a lot of people around him will. I mean, it was a terrible decision, to be honest. The irony is, I would have been an MP up until last Thursday, probably, which feels odd because it feels like a lifetime ago. So it's only been a few months because
Well, you've gone back to the day job, haven't you? You're involved in many businesses. The drinks are on you, it turns out.
Well, no, the drinks are, hopefully soon.
You're working on it. You're working on it
soon. Because as I was saying earlier, someone told me if you want to end up with a small fortune in politics, you've got to start with a large one. So you don't go to politics for money. So now back to real life, I've got to pay the bills and stuff like that. But look, yes, he was, because it was he made the wrong decision. Because it's the idea that the economy was clearly going to get better, inflation was going to come down, interest rates were going to come down, Rwanda was always going to be an issue, the prison situation was clearly going to be an issue from what they knew about it. But on balance, I think still, if you are Prime Minister, do good, and then go as long as you can.
Well, he could have gone to January, couldn't he?
I think you don't want to go last minute. You don't want to go last minute because that looks desperate. But I think November felt right, and I think a lot of my colleagues, someone was just saying the other day, they sort of expected to lose, but they expected to lose in November. And it's just that adjustment. Now, holding an election is not about me and my former colleagues, it's about people in the country. But nonetheless, having that time to let your policies do the work, that's what he should have relied on.
New leader Kemi Badenoch has been in post for 2 weeks. What's your appraisal of her performance so far?
I think she's, obviously asking the right questions in terms of really testing the systems around Keir Starmer, around his hypocrisy, about the fact he had this Ming-Val strategy of not saying anything during the election campaign. But apart from his integrity, honesty, etc., and not taking freebies, he's done everything but that. And he's also delivered things like the winter fuel allowance cuts. He's annoyed the farmers immeasurably, which will actually end up costing us. So she's asking the right questions. I think she's a little bit nervous at the moment. I think she's got to find her feet a little bit more, but there's time for that.
OK, and what about, the future? How does Kemi Badenoch solve a problem like Nigel Farage?
I don't think she should rush to solve the problem. You've obviously got to solve it.
Because that was Jenrick's plan, was to deal with reform straight away, see them off at the pass.
Yeah, but I think the thing is with what Rob was providing, he was providing a totally complete policy platform. But that doesn't.
He was a walking manifesto, wasn't he?
He was, but that's great. But he hasn't asked the rest of the members what they think, and clearly they didn't vote for him. So that's probably answers part of that question. What Kemi's done, she now needs to work with the party and actually make sure that her platform at the next election is bought into by everyone because they've helped to formulate it, the members, that is.
For the Conservatives to achieve power once again, they're either going to have to do a deal with reform before or after the election, aren't they? Because those 4.1 million reform votes won't dwindle, I don't think. No, they could even go up.
But I think that, and I've said this a lot, that those reform voters, they haven't all voted reform because of immigration, because of taxes going up. Clearly a lot have. But mainly they voted because we weren't good enough in actually governing. So the first thing we've got to do is competence. We've got to show we've changed. We've got to show we've learnt, see where that beds in, but then come up with the answers about immigration, about the economy, about taxes, and explain to Nigel Farage and reform voters, look, you vote reform, you're just going to end up with Labour.
I mean, if you were in the shadow cabinet now, would you be ruling out a deal with Farage, or would you keep that door ajar?
I think just some sort of open deal I'd probably rule out. I think that you've got to have conversations with everybody. You know, at the end of the day, good politics means you speak to, if you want to get stuff done, you do stuff cross-party with the Labour government, frankly, as well, in terms of politics, because this is our country. You know, you can't be overly tribal about it. But similarly with reform, you've just got to have conversations with them and productive, and then see where that leads. That's not about doing deals or not doing deals. Just have conversations.
On that, we can agree. Paul, what a thrill to see you again.
Really
you can see you're enjoying life outside politics. My thanks to former Conservative MP and former Government Minister Paul Scully. Now, next up, in a Mark Dolan Tonight exclusive, I'll be exposing the scandal of huge numbers of construction workers taking their own lives. This country would be nothing without its builders, and I'll be joined in the studio by two of these brave heroes who'll be sharing their moving and painful stories. That's next.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What about train Wi-Fi? The Times. It's so funny the Times did this story, because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I open the Times, and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, well, that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode. One James Bond
film.
movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink. Let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and you know, commute to work every single day, and you're paying all this money, and you can't.
It's so expensive. You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else, or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse, though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nigel Farage is the topic of my Take at 10. You won't want to miss it, but first this. In a shock report, it's been revealed that 7,000 UK construction workers have lost their lives to suicide in the last decade, enough to build and populate an entire city. These devastating figures reveal that builders and tradespeople are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than the national average as a result of financial strain and mental health challenges, which see many turn to drugs and alcohol to cope. The epidemic has cost the industry almost £3 billion in absences over the last year alone. in a staggering loss of output that could have built 150,000 homes, 80 schools and 3 hospitals. Well, on the tools is the UK's largest tradespeople community, and its CEO, Lee Wilcox, joins me now, as well as Joe Baker, who is a builder and founder of Second City Screed, and he's a man who's faced his own struggles and is an ambassador for this important campaign. First of all, Lee, great to have you in the studio.
Thanks for having us.
You're not a proper builder, are you?
I'm not a proper builder, no. No, my hands are too soft.
You've put together this great community, but you're not a plasterer or a lecky or anything like that.
I've tried it many times but failed, yeah.
But why does On the Tools exist?
On the Tools exists to improve the lives of every tradesperson in the UK. That's our mission.
And why is it necessary?
Because tradespeople aren't looked after. They don't have the same perks, privileges as the white-collar world. They're not...
HR departments and all that stuff.
Exactly that. You know, there's no union that covers construction. There's no department of construction. We sort of fit into business and trade, and there's a minister, I think it's Lucy Jones, but I'm not. You know, it's all fragmented within government, and it should have its own purpose. It should have its own place.
And what are the hardest aspects of being a builder? What are they up against every day?
The challenge that they've always got is that it's stacked. I mean, we've done loads of research around this, but loneliness is one of the things that goes unnoticed, right? So trades are often working alone for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Getting paid is a massive, massive problem. The industry, first half of 2023, there was 4,000 SMEs went up because they couldn't get paid, and therefore cash flow.
That's 4,000 small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, in the first half.
Right, and they're basically they're financially viable companies that haven't been paid and therefore closed down.
And they're the struggles that they have. Yeah, you know, if you're a tradesperson and you are feeling unwell, you can't take a day's sick because you don't get paid. You know, there's no pensions, no workplace pension. Yeah, they're all contributing national insurance. You know, all of these things are working against them. They're away from their families, often staying away in digs for months on end, weeks on end, and it's a completely different industry to what you and I work in that white-collar world, and no one looks after it. You know, I don't think I'll be shocked if people actually know about these stats, you know, around the 7,000. It's why we started this campaign.
7,000 people lost to suicide in a decade. If it was a disease, people would be talking about that and what the NHS is going to do about it.
2 people a day. Every day.
2 people a day, every day. And young, fit, mainly men in their prime, in their 20s, 30s and 40s.
Exactly
with so much to live for, but they take their lives. Joe, lovely to see you in the studio as well.
Thank you.
You, on the other hand, are a proper builder.
Wouldn't say builder, but I'm in the construction industry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be asking for a quote later. I'm thinking of a second conservatory, but although that will get taxed by Rachel Reeves. Can I ask you what you've been through in your... Because you've got your personal story, haven't you? You've been very successful in what you do, but on a private, on the private side, you've struggled at times.
Yeah, massively so, yeah. So... attempted suicide and was deep into addiction with alcohol. Really did face struggles. This was before I was in the construction industry, believe it or not. Much related to COVID, but yeah, my journey's been a big struggle. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you relate to that sort of comment there that was made by Lee about loneliness and isolation and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think not so much for me. I don't tend to do a lot of work away from home, but the people that I do speak to in the construction industry are, you know, like Lee said, they're away from home for a long periods of time sometimes, and that can be very, very lonely and no one to talk to, you know, when you're on your own, really.
How did you pull yourself out of it?
Through talking to people, reaching out to help from support networks and becoming sober.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great achievement. It's hard to blame builders, tradespeople, hitting the pub at the end of a long working day because it is incredibly hard work. And many do go to the pub just for that release, don't they?
They do, yeah. And I think it's a society, isn't it? I think it's that through my recovery that there's a lot of it's associated, it's a habit, it becomes habit, it's learned behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like you say, you've had a stressful day. People hit a drink, you've had celebrations, people hit the drink, it's associated, isn't it, I think?
Indeed. I mean, I've got the highest regard for builders, construction workers, tradespeople, and when I've watched them working, they come in early. They seem, a lot of the builders that I've known, they start the day with a full English, which they need because it's very physically demanding work. And it's a sandwich and a can of Coke at lunchtime, and then it's the pub in the evening. I'm not so aware of or across the drug side of it, but have drugs entered that world of construction, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a big relationship between construction and drugs or alcohol, and I think the common misconception is that alcohol is a drug, and I think people separate the two sometimes, that, you know, alcohol is probably one of the most dangerous drugs out there.
And I mean, do some builders take drugs or even drink during the day? During the working day, does that go on?
I would say it potentially happens. It's not something I've come across in the construction industry, but I'm not saying it's impossible.
Do you think builders and construction workers are underappreciated in our society?
Yeah, I do. I think we're underappreciated and undervalued. I think if you look at, you know, my journey down here, I travelled down on the motorway. It was built by construction workers.
Yeah.
On a train, it's built by construction workers. The building we're in is built by construction workers. I think the economy would stop if it wasn't for us.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what percentage of tradespeople are men, because there are many fantastic women that work in this industry. But is this an issue with I don't know, the demonisation of men slightly, Lee? This idea of toxic masculinity, which maybe builders are unfairly lumped in with?
Yeah, look, the industry it's really fragmented. It is massively dominated by men. 1% boots on the ground is women. That's been the same for the last 10 years. So there are more women joining. There's been a big push for that over the last couple of years. But I think there's a massive stigma around how men are meant to act in this industry, and I think that plays out. I think it plays out in how they're supported as well, because in an industry where the suicide rate is higher than any other, you're 4 times more likely to die by suicide in this industry. How can there not be more support than any other industry? But there's far less.
I've been so privileged and honoured to have both of you in the studio. The work you're doing is absolutely fantastic. Is there a website or something?
There is. So
go for it.
Thursday, we went across 10 cities. We dropped 7,000 hard hats to symbolise the lives we've lost. The campaign is called The Lost City. TheLostCity.org is where you can go and donate. We're trying to raise £2.5 million.
TheLostCity.org.
That's the one.
TheLostCity.org. The Samaritans are there to help. Do reach out. 116 123. 116 123 Samaritans. Next up, my take at 10. Nigel Farage. Don't go anywhere.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's going to be turning colder for all of us as we head into the new working week, with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us, and plenty of blustery showers around as well. This is all thanks to this area of low pressure that's moving in from the northwest towards the UK as we go through into the start of Monday and Tuesday. Back to this evening though, a bit of a mixed picture across the UK. Plenty of cloud, some outbreaks of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across the southern half of the UK, but further north staying a little bit drier. Plenty of clear spells around, some blustery showers across the far north of Scotland. These likely to turn to sleet and snow over the hills, and it'll be a really chilly start to the morning across parts of Scotland, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places. So this could mean some icy stretches, so do take care during Monday morning's rush hour. But further south, a bit of a milder start to the morning, plenty of showery rain around, this perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, generally a bit of a drier start to the day though, some sunny spells as we go through the morning. But for Scotland, despite the bright start, it will be a really chilly start, so do take care if you are on the roads during Monday morning's rush hours. There could be some ice on some untreated surfaces. Those sleet and snow showers continue to pile in across northern parts of Scotland throughout all of Monday, and that initial area of rain across the southern areas clears away to the south, but this next area of rain arrives across parts of Northern Ireland, most likely falling as rain, but we could see some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through Monday afternoon. Some sunny spells across eastern areas through the afternoon, but feeling really quite chilly here. Temperatures only around 2 or 3 degrees, but just holding on to that milder air further south. To start on Tuesday, we could see some disruptive snow across northern parts of England, most likely falling over high ground, but there is a chance that we could see sleet and snow to lower levels, so do take care if you are out on Tuesday morning. But Tuesday afternoon, there should be plenty of sunny spells around, but still plenty of blustery showers, particularly across the northern half of the UK, and it will be feeling cooler as we go towards the middle part of the week, with temperatures well below average for the time of year.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla, Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, how are you? It is 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, a year on from his stint on I'm a Celebrity, and now Nigel Farage is facing the snakes and reptiles of British politics. I'll be explaining why Farage is Britain's most important politician and why eventually he will be king of the political jungle. Fresh embarrassment for the Prime Minister as Donald Trump considers a Rwanda plan to tackle illegal immigration in the US. And as he gets close to becoming law, is assisted dying morally wrong? I'll be asking former government minister and Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe. Plus, my top pundits tonight, historian and fellow of the Danube Institute, David Oldroyd-Bolt, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and political commentator and former Labour Party prospective parliamentary candidate, Susie Stride. Plus tomorrow's papers at 10:30 sharp with full pundit reaction. But coming up in my take at 10, why Farage is going to be the king of the political jungle. All that first, however, the Queen of GB News, Sophia Wensler.
Mark, thank you, and good evening. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom at 10 o'clock. Joe Biden's administration has lifted the ban on Ukraine using US weapons to strike deep inside Russia. That's according to Reuters news agency. It's understood Ukraine plans to conduct its first long-range attacks in the coming days. The US U-turn comes after months of requests by Volodymyr Zelensky to allow Ukraine's military to use US weapons. It's not clear if Donald Trump will reverse Biden's decision when he takes office. Trump has long criticised the scale of US financial and military aid to Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer has said he has no plans to speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin, as he said we need to double down on support for Ukraine. The Prime Minister pledged that Ukraine was top of his agenda at this week's G20 summit of world leaders and told reporters that there's got to be full support for as long as it takes. police should focus on tackling crime, Sir Keir Starmer has suggested in his first public comments about the free speech row over social media remarks made by a Telegraph journalist. Alison Pearson was visited by Essex Police on Remembrance Sunday over allegations that a deleted social media post incited racial hatred. Speaking on his way to the G20 summit, the Prime Minister was asked whether police should be prioritising free speech over hurt feelings. He said, as a general principle, the police should concentrate on what matters most to their communities. Number 10 sources said that the Prime Minister's view, focusing on what matters most to communities, equated to tackling crime. And in other news, an international manhunt is underway for the husband of a woman who was murdered and found in the boot of a car. 24-year-old Harshita Brella was discovered in London last Thursday after police received a call from a member of the public concerned for her welfare. Police are now searching for Harshita's husband, Pankaj Lamba, but he is thought to have fled the country. A mandatory referral has been made to the Independent Office for Police Conduct by Northamptonshire Police because of previous contact with Miss Brella. Now, it's being reported that ministers are drawing up contingency plans to deal with food shortages if farmers go on strike over the Treasury's inheritance tax rate on farms. Thousands of farmers from across the country are descending on London this week in objection to the government plans that will see farming assets worth more than £1 million hit with a 20% inheritance tax. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Fresh embarrassment for Sir Keir Starmer as Donald Trump considers adopting the Rwanda plan. Plus, as it gets close to becoming law, is assisted dying morally wrong? I'll be asking former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe in just a few minutes. But first, my take at 10. Funny to think that this time last year, Nigel Farage was swallowing testicles in the jungle. And roll on 12 months and he has entered the jungle of parliamentary politics, leading an insurgent political party which he took over just weeks before the election, garnering 4.1 million votes into the bargain. Now, depending on your perspective, Nigel Farage has either changed Britain for the better or damaged it irrevocably. But changed it, he has. Once a figure of derision in the European Parliament, he had the last laugh as the political revolutionary that he absolutely is. This is a man who started a project decades ago in a back office in Brussels to take Britain out of the European Union, and he achieved it. Now, that would be enough for most public figures. Pop that on your CV and your Who's Who listing will sit comfortably alongside plenty of prominent prime ministers and presidents. But this is the same guy who caused an earthquake in the world of financial services when he exposed the debanking scandal, with people being denied bank accounts, including himself, potentially and arguably because of their political beliefs. Farage has led a broadcasting revolution here at GB News, which is growing its audience on a daily basis, routinely knocking BBC News and Sky News into a cocked hat. This show, Mark Dolan Tonight, is a big part of that revolution. I'm here every night to inform you, entertain you, stimulate you, and give you a voice. Farage has been at Dover in his well-waxed barber jacket, calling out the economic, national security and humanitarian disaster that is the Channel migrant crisis, pursuing that cause long before it was fashionable and long before people woke up to the eye-watering cost of migrant hotels, £3 billion a year and counting, as well as the impact on small towns and cities where these folk are dumped. Because after all, it's never Islington or Hampstead, is it? It was only Farage and a few brave Tory backbenchers who called out the madness of lockdowns and mask and vaccine tyranny. The COVID response and the borrowing of £500 billion to pay healthy people to stay at home is why the country is where it is right now. So if you look at this man's track record, you underestimate him at your peril. For example, he wants to be Britain's next Prime Minister. I wouldn't put it past him. Stranger things have happened. Look at Trump's crazy landslide earlier this month. Farage even called it right with regard to Trump's eventual victory, backing the Donald even when he looked down and out. Farage's other great legacy will be to save the special relationship with America. So whether you love Farage or hate him, it's always wise to listen to him. Particularly because he's the only senior politician, for example, pushing for answers about the alleged Manchester airport attack on armed police officers, which led to the hospitalisation of a female cop. And he was the only senior politician to ask questions about Southport and whether the public were being kept in the dark about the circumstances of it at the time. Asking questions, probing, seeking the truth, speaking up for the public, as he always has. Long may it continue. Nigel Farage is the establishment's worst nightmare. If he ever becomes Prime Minister, it's game over for all of them. Yes, indeed. A year on from his TV stint in Australia, it's hard to bet against Nigel Farage becoming the king of the political jungle. What do you think? How much can he achieve in the next 4.5 years? gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your comments shortly, but first, tonight's top pundits. We have broadcaster and historian David Oldroyd-Bolt, editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and, I'm delighted to say, former Labour Party prospective parliamentary candidate, broadcaster and activist Susie Stride. David, good to see you again, looking very corduroy this evening, may I say. What do you think about this? Nigel Farage has achieved an awful lot in just a few months. What can he achieve in the next 4 years?
Well, on any rational analysis of British politics since Mrs Thatcher, he is, along with Gordon Brown, the most consequential politician this nation has had. He's changed the country more than anyone other than Brown, and I would argue probably changed the country for longer than Brown, because Brown's changes were structural. They were about the way that taxation is used, they were about the way that the state is built. That can be changed by future governments. Changing Brexit, reversing it so that we go back into the European Union, I would argue is next to impossible. So that cements his legacy. As to the rather extraordinary panegyric you gave him, if ever he needs a speechwriter, you should get the job.
I'll tell you, I'm happy to do that.
I would agree in about half of it. He wasn't, it must be remembered, front and centre of the anti-lockdown campaign. It took him quite a while to come around, not really until the latter half of 2020. That honour goes to people like Charles Walker, the former Conservative MP for Broxbourne. That honour goes to people like Toby Young and Dan Hannan. But when he did come around, he came around fully.
Indeed, and I think he certainly, if he'd been Prime Minister at a time, he wouldn't have gone past lockdown number 1, would he?
I think that's probably true, but then that's also true of a great many politicians. I think Farage is an almost intangible substance in politics because he seems to have the ability to see around political corners and to know what's coming next, what the public are going to be feeling aggrieved about, and how much he can push that for political gain. There is no other politician at the moment who has that. Boris Johnson, I think, had a species of that, but also was prone to undermining himself in a way that Farage isn't. For all that Farage has a colourful personal life, he's actually very straightforward and disciplined when it comes to keeping on political message. So I think it's entirely possible that, given Mrs Badenoch doesn't have the backing of the entire Conservative Party by any means, given that she's already gone off to, I would say, a rather lacklustre start, give it a couple of years, see what the state of the special relationship is, and it could well be that Nigel Farage is best placed on the right to lead a Conservative-style party into government.
Fascinating. And here's the thing, you can't really gloat, can you, Susie? Because Nigel Farage is as much of a threat to Sir Keir Starmer as he is Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've now met Nigel Farage, obviously, like I do.
Well, he's your bestie, isn't he?
Well, that's what all my friends keep saying that to me. Look, it's really interesting.
He's a very charming man, isn't he?
But do you know what? It's very interesting what you say about anti-establishment, because it's just interesting you say that, because part of me feels like I'm a bit anti-establishment.
Yes,
you know, and so there's aspects of, you know, what he says that, you know, I agree with. Obviously, there's chunks of what he says that I don't. It's interesting because he used his PMQ question. I mean, Keir's comeback was hilarious and Farage did laugh. But he used his question to talk about Avam, you know, and to say about Avam's Revolutionary Guard being, you know, which we've got, you know, designated as a terrorist group.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well done to you, because I work, you know, I don't work, I've volunteered with Iranian refugees, and Iran is such an evil country, you know, and it needs freeing from these awful people. And I just thought, well, you know, well done, Nigel. And I do think there's you know, there is a side to him which is redeemable. There are things, you know, that I think, you know, and maybe I should have a chat with him. There are sides, you know.
What do you disagree with Nigel about?
Well, for example, when it comes to Europe, I felt we needed to reform that relationship. Look, my understanding is, again, I'm not an economist, but when you speak to economists, you know, this guy who's a top economist at Oxford University, and he was like, it's been devastating for the economy coming out of Europe. Now, look, you know, again, I'm not going to pretend I know, you know, all the ins and outs of that, but, you know, I actually felt that relationship needed reforming rather than what happened.
Do you agree with Nigel on immigration?
I think that there are things he says on immigration which are important. I think it's, you know, a complete disaster that we're wasting this amount of money on putting people in hotels. I think it's appalling that people are losing their lives. I think sometimes the way he comes across on it doesn't always come across in a compassionate way, and so you know, that part of it I wouldn't agree with. But there's lots of things about reform that I don't agree with, I would say. And I think generally in the biggest thing for me is, you know, I come from an area with the highest child poverty rates, and I feel like sometimes they lack an understanding of why people are poor. Do you know what I mean? There are people that abuse the system, but there are people that are poor and it's not their fault, and they struggle, and we need to help them, and we want a country where everyone can thrive. And I'd like to see that side of him a bit more. On whether we think he can somehow do a Donald Trump in this country, I don't think he can, because I think America's very different to this country, and I just think we're not a country of extremes. This is a strength in our country. It's why we don't have civil wars and crazy things happening. But I think you need those people in democracy. You need those people to challenge. And you know, I'm not
calling Nigel an extremist.
No, I'm not calling him an extremist. I'm saying, as a country, we're not a country of extremes.
OK, fair enough.
You know.
Charlotte, so how much can Nigel Farage achieve in the next 4 years in the Commons? And you know, what will be his role in 4 years' time when we go to the polls?
Well, it's quite nice to see him at PMQs, actually, isn't it? Like, he does. He's one of the very few people in there that actually speaks the language we all speak, which is normal, say it like it is. You know, and we're so bored. I really feel like the tide is changing. We're so bored on politicians giving their politicians answers. And I think that's why Trump has been so popular and why populism is emerging. And I think, you know, it's great that he's there and he's got a voice for the people.
Yeah, I mean...
In 4 years' time, I just don't think he'll be Prime Minister then.
Can he recalibrate politics? I mean, how do the Tories, you know, deal with the Nigel question? How do they address that?
Well, I know. I mean, Kemi's dancing on the edges of speaking real talk, and she's trying her best, but she's not quite achieving it. So, I mean, I don't know whether she tries to bring him in. It doesn't sound like he's going to be sort of that interested in doing so.
You just have to look at the guy's CV, don't you? Broadcasting revolution at GB News, the debanking scandal, Brexit, then Reform UK's performance in July of this year. His track record means that this guy has to be taken seriously.
And also, he's really genuinely good friends with the new President of the United States.
Yeah.
That's not to be underestimated. And David Lammy has said, you know, that Trump is no friend of Britain, but, you know, he actually is friends with Donald Trump, and that's going to be really important.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder whether the Tories in 4 years' time will simply need to fall to their knees and just beg Nigel Farage for help.
Well, I think it was a massive strategic mistake for them not to come to an alliance with Reform in this past general election as they had in the previous one. Those figures who were calling for it, including Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, well, I think were proved right by history. They could have won that election, or at least brought it to a fighting draw. They would not have gone down as they did this time. They'd be foolish not to do it next time.
Fascinating stuff. Folks, Anne Widdecombe waiting in the wings. We're going to talk about assisted dying. Is it morally wrong? Plus, fresh embarrassment for the Prime Minister regarding the Rwanda plan. But first, time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of an extra £3,000 in your bank account every month for the next year. That's a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here are the details.
This is your good luck.
Brilliant stuff. Good luck with that one, folks. Now, coming up, tomorrow's front pages. Plus, is assisted dying morally wrong? And fresh embarrassment for the Prime Minister as it's revealed Donald Trump is considering introducing, wait for it, a Rwanda-style plan to tackle illegal immigration. Anne Widdecombe responds. See you in 2.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Millions are struggling to stay warm with the wet weather, the cost of living and, of course, cuts to fuel payments.
Yes, winter is fast approaching, so it's crucial to find cost-effective ways to save on your energy expenses whilst staying reasonably warm.
So joining us to provide advice on heating your home, or at least staying warm somehow, is one of the leading voices on lowering energy bills, Nick Miles. And you are very welcome in here this morning. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, in the olden days, you just used to put on an extra jumper. But actually, it's more serious than that, isn't it? What is the best way, the most cost-effective way to keep your home warm?
Some of the bigger things is we need to do more things on insulating our properties, but actually sometimes, it can be simple things like turning down a thermostat. Those that have got the luxury of being able to afford energy bills and keep their homes on the thermostat a bit too high. If you just turn it down by one simple degree, as long as you keep it between 18 and 22 degrees, can save up to 5 to 10% of your energy bill. So that's a kind of a very simple way of doing things, but it can be other little tips and tricks you can do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I always get it when people say about this, but like 18 degrees is not warm for a house.
No, and it's twofold actually. It's that kind of relative temperature, but also it's the kind of drafts and things you have in your house. So it's the comfort factor. So what we have a lot of old properties in our country. You've got some 8 million hard-to-treat properties built before World War II that have got poor insulation, but also very, very drafty. So it's the temperature and it's the kind of the draftiness of them that kind of keeps us uncomfortable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, folks, lots to get through. And let me tell you that this is a very big story. And it is about Donald Trump, who it's rumoured is considering a Rwanda-style plan to tackle illegal immigration in the United States. Well, let's get reaction now from former government minister and now Reform UK spokesperson, Anne Widdecombe. Anne, good to see you. This would be mightily embarrassing for the Prime Minister, given that he axed the Rwanda plan on day one of achieving office.
Yes, he axed the only deterrent that existed and didn't put in its place any other deterrent. Now, you rightly say Trump is rumoured to be considering. There's nothing definite yet, but it would make sense for him to seek a deterrent. But given the order of magnitude of the problem, I think it would have to be something more than, one set of facilities in Rwanda. But, yes, it's embarrassing for the Prime Minister because he poured scorn on it, suggested it made no sense at all, and now the leader of the Western world is saying, well, actually, it might make sense.
Do you anticipate that the Prime Minister will make any progress stopping the boats in the run-up to the next election over the next 4.5 years, Anne? Do you think he'll dent the numbers?
No, absolutely no chance at all. If you look at what's been happening, he's made a great of the fact that 1 or 2 gangs have been smashed and, great fanfare about this. And yet still the boats are coming in at record levels and still, we're overrun with more illegal immigrants than we can sensibly cope with. We're still putting them in hotels, for heaven's sake. And so, no, I don't see any progress yet, and I don't expect to see any progress unless he introduces a deterrent.
Of course, the Prime Minister will argue that the Rwanda plan was an expensive white elephant. But let's talk about the Prime Minister now, Anne, if we can, because he faces a tug of love, doesn't he, between the EU and Washington, between Brussels and Washington. Does he forge closer ties with Brussels, or does he strike a bumper trade deal with the United States? Which direction do you think he should take?
I don't think there's much tug of love with Washington, not with the Labour government in Washington. I think he's very, very drawn to the EU. We all know that. It's not much of a secret. But nevertheless, we're going to need a deal with Washington. We're certainly going to need it if Trump carries out his suggestion of simply imposing tariffs right, left and centre. So we're going to need that trade deal. And so he's got to think about it. And frankly, I think the first thing he should do is sack Bannon. I mean, Bannon is a very big obstacle in the way of trust between the USA and Britain.
And let's talk now about a free vote in the House of Commons, which is on assisted dying. It's happening at the end of the month. However, the former chief coroner has said it risks opening the door to non-voluntary euthanasia. What's your view?
And my view is that is exactly the danger. Now, unlike some of my co-religionists, I've never had a problem with the view that sometimes life does become, because of pain and very short time to live, it does become unbearable, and if it's the will of the person and not the will of anybody else around them, I can live with that. But the reason I've always voted against assisted dying when I was in the House of Commons, and I'm now campaigning against this bill from outside, is that I do not believe that it is possible to ensure adequate safeguards in law. It will become a runaway bus in a very short time. The abortion bill did. It will become a runaway bus. You won't need to change the law. You'll just need to have the practice gradually loosened over time. For example, let me give you a direct comparison. In the abortion law, you had to have 2 doctors. This is a 1967 Act certifying that a woman should have an abortion. Under this bill, you have to have 2 doctors certifying that somebody should be allowed assisted dying. Now, we know that between 1967 and 1990, there wasn't any change in the law on abortion at all, but the change in practice was such that doctors were just automatically signing forms. Indeed, a few years later, they were pre-signing forms. And that is what happens. And if you look at Holland, you look even at Oregon, which is supposed to be a paradise of assisted dying, 47% of those who avail themselves of it quoted being a burden, and only 28% quoted pain. Now, dear heaven, that doesn't tell you what the problem is. I don't know what does.
Anne, you are a practising Christian, a person of deep faith. Is assisted dying a sin?
Well, as I said right at the beginning, I and some of my co-religionists disagree on this one. I mean, I am firmly convinced there can't be adequate safeguards, and therefore there's too great a danger. But is it always a sin? Well, let me ask you this. If you were a soldier and 2 of your colleagues were so severely wounded that they couldn't move, and there was an enemy coming over the horizon that was known for torture and imposing slow deaths, telling me you wouldn't shoot them if they asked you to?
And wise words as ever. Of course not. The empathy would always kick in. Anne, always a thrill. We'll see you in a week's time. My thanks to former Government Minister, the voice of reason, the one and only Anne Widdecombe. Have a good week, Anne. See you next time.
Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. Listen, earlier we talked about the suicide of construction workers, 7,000 in the last 10 years. 2 a day, 2 builders a day take their own lives. If anyone's affected by this issue of depression, if you're struggling, then we've got the Samaritans. And let me tell you, their 24-hour helpline is 116123. It's also great in relation to assisted dying as well. Samaritans 116123. OK, folks, next up the papers. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's going to be turning colder for all of us as we head into the new working week, with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us, and plenty of blustery showers around as well. This is all thanks to this area of low pressure that's moving in from the northwest towards the UK as we go through into the start of Monday and Tuesday. Back to this evening though, a bit of a mixed picture across the UK. Plenty of cloud, some outbreaks of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across the southern half of the UK, but further north staying a little bit drier. drier, plenty of clear spells around, some blustery showers across the far north of Scotland. These likely to turn to sleet and snow over the hills, and it'll be a really chilly start to the morning across parts of Scotland, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places. So this could mean some icy stretches, so do take care during Monday morning's rush hour. But further south, a bit of a milder start to the morning, plenty of showery rain around, this perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, generally a bit of a drier start to the day though, some sunny spells as we go through the morning. But for Scotland, despite the bright start, it will be a really chilly start, so do take care if you are on the roads during Monday morning's rush hours. There could be some ice on some untreated surfaces. Those sleet and snow showers continue to pile in across northern parts of Scotland throughout all of Monday, and that initial area of rain across the southern areas clears away to the south, but this next area of rain arrives across parts of Northern Ireland, most likely falling as rain, but we could see some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through Monday afternoon. Some sunny spells across eastern areas through the afternoon, but feeling really quite chilly here. Temperatures only around 2 or 3 degrees, but just holding on to that milder air further south. To start on Tuesday, we could see some disruptive snow across northern parts of England, most likely falling over high ground, but there is a chance that we could see sleet and snow to lower levels, so do take care if you are out on Tuesday morning. But Tuesday afternoon, there should be plenty of sunny spells around, but still plenty of blustery showers, particularly across the northern half of the UK, and it will be feeling cooler as we go towards the middle part of the week, with temperatures well below average for the time of year.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Just gone 10:30, so time for this. I will start with a bit of a light-hearted story in the Daily Star. Jungle stars warned to beware of hairy beasts. I'm a celeb Yeti. Get me out of here. Terrified stars on I'm a Celeb have been told to stick close together in the jungle to prevent aggressive, hairy Aussie Yetis from attacking them, which, to be fair, would make great TV. The Daily Express. Labour war on farmers is threat to food security. The Independent revealed horrific hidden death toll of domestic abuse. iNewspaper, move as close as possible to EU in Brexit reset. Business bosses urge Starmer. Metro, great sewage spill scandal. Flush our gush. Hundreds of toilets are flushing straight into rivers because of bungled plumbing, with discharges often flowing unchecked for years. What a dreadful story that one is. Daily Mirror now. Body in boot horror. Husband is on the run abroad after murdered 20-year-old wife found. Manhunt is the headline. And the Daily Telegraph. Biden gives green light for strikes in Russia. Joe Biden, who, let's not forget, remains the president for another few weeks, has given approval for Ukraine to strike targets within Russia with US-supplied long-range missiles for the first time. In a significant policy shift, just weeks before he stands down, the US president signed off on the use of rockets within the Kursk region. Biden's decision will raise expectations that he's also set to drop his opposition to the use of British-made Storm Shadow missiles within Russia. Team Trump in the red corner. Donald Trump, the US president-elect, holds a UFC heavyweight championship belt alongside his new bestie, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, as they attend a fight at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Tackle violent crime, not tweets, Sir Keir Starmer urges the police. Police should focus on tackling violent crime and burglaries instead of questioning people over their social media posts, Sir Keir Starmer has said. The PM urged forces to concentrate on what matters most to their communities amid the deepening row over a police investigation into Telegraph writer Alison Pearson's post on X a year ago. Farmers have nothing to lose in tax protest amid fears for food supply is the other story. Farmers have nothing to lose, campaigners have warned, amid fears that the industry will disrupt food supplies over the government's inheritance tax raid. OK, let's get full pundit reaction now in the company of David Oldroyd-Bolt, Charlotte Griffiths and Susie Stride. And let's start with the farmers if we can, Charlotte. This story is not going away, is it? Farmers have nothing to lose in tax protest amid fear for the food supply of this country. Is this going to be Sir Keir Starmer's poll tax moment?
It's going to get so bad next weekend when the protests start. It's the 19th of November, isn't it?
Well, actually, I think it's Tuesday.
Oh, God, I got it. Is it? Okay,
yeah,
right,
but you're like me, you can't believe how quickly the month is going by.
19th is Tuesday, gosh.
It is crazy. So Tuesday.
No, it's going to be big, and I think a lot of people who aren't farmers are going to join this protest.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you know, 60% is it of our food supply comes from locally grown, and that's where we need to be. I mean, globalisation is not going to work with the food supply as the years go by, the decades go by. Global politics. We need to be eating and growing our own food sustainably, seasonally. And we need to be relying on our own farmers, not destroying their lives.
Indeed. I think, Susie, you always want farms to be passed down the generations, don't you, irrespective of their value?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I do think that's really important. And I think, you know, let's see whether there's any change on this. But like I mentioned earlier, I think it's interesting that Radio 4 was saying that actually it's 500 farms. And I'm interested to see...
But for me, that would be 500 too many. I don't think a single farm should be subject to inheritance tax because you always want it to stay in the family, don't you? Even if it's worth 10 billion, I think the point is if it's a legacy, sometimes over hundreds of years, then that's rather important, don't you think?
I think it is important. I think, for me, the bigger picture is we're in difficult economic times. They're making difficult decisions. Whether this is the right decision or not, look, I didn't have to make this decision. Again, like, I don't know all the ins and outs. You know, I don't agree.
Your argument would be the books are horrible thanks to the Tories.
Yes.
What choice do they have?
Yes, thank you for helping me with that. Yes, but I think at the same time, I'm interested to see. I'm just interested to see, is it the number of farmers they're saying that are impacted? However, you know, I wouldn't want to pick a fight with the farmers. I think it is important to say, look, you know, they are producing our food, you know, and whatnot. But
the thing is, there's such North London, Islington. It's exactly the trap that the Blair era fell into. These people have never been to the countryside, as far as I can tell. Well, what's different now is Clarkson's farm's been invented. Everyone knows how hard it is to be a farmer. Thank you, Jeremy Clarkson. Even
because he's a multi-millionaire who struggles to make money from his own farm.
So even townies, the whole nation knows now it's really hard to be a farmer. They're not rich.
Even Gerald struggles to make. Even Caleb struggles to make money. That's if you want to show.
And as Clarkson has pointed out again and again, farming workers have the worst mental health of any sector in this country. 36% of farm workers report depression, 47% report constant anxiety. How is that going to be in any way helped by thinking that the moment one of them dies, and they do tend to die younger because it's a harder job than most people have these days, their family will lose the farm or they'll have to sell parts of it to keep it going. I think it's an absolutely pernicious policy. It shows quite how completely callous Keir Starmer can be, because he must know precisely what this is going to do, as must Ms Reeves.
Is he callous? Is that harsh?
I mean, look, I don't think he's... Look, we've got to see where the country's at. We did inherit whatever size black hole, you know.
The country's broke.
The country's broke. I mean, that's not like that's not a debate to be. That's not a debate to be had. And ultimately, that is the situation we're in. They're having to make decisions that they don't necessarily want to make, but they have to make them. You know, the NHS was on its knees. Schools were crumbling. Sewage in rivers. All these things were happening, and so they have to make tough decisions. I mean, sewage in rivers is actually more about regulation.
Money for for every year is on its knees.
But the point is they had to make tough decisions. Now, again, I'm not going to say necessarily this is wrong or right. I'm interested to see how many farmers. But it is interesting, this thing about big, like, wealthy people buying up land and, you know, actually that not being good for small farms. I also did read that something to do with that if it's a couple and a farm, that actually they can, you know,
share the
yeah. So let's see how many. But I don't think we should.
Why are so many farmers protesting about it if so few are affected?
Well, because I think ultimately, obviously, they do feel like that they're victims in this situation, and they may well be. Look, they may well be.
Well, I think it's because many farmers will not be affected, but they're very angry about the messaging.
I don't agree.
Because I don't think everyone on that convoy yesterday and today at the Welsh Labour Party conference, I don't think they'll all be subject to this inheritance tax.
Well, it may well not be so, but it's a sector.
They're fighting on behalf of their industry and their colleagues, aren't they?
Well, they're fighting on behalf of a livelihood, but they're also fighting on behalf of a traditional Britain that comes under constant attack from every Labour government there's ever been. Even going back to 1945, Attlee's manifesto promised better farming. In fact, going back to 1923, to Ramsay MacDonald promised better farming and better conditions. And, of course, the first people they go after are landowners, because within the Labour movement they are seen as these great fat cats who sit on millions of acres and don't do anything with it. It's absolutely...
So is this class warfare, like the VAT raid on private schools?
It is a species of class warfare. Of course it is.
Definitely.
It's a species of class warfare.
I mean, the VAT...
And they know within the Labour movement that it's an easy target because there aren't that many socialist farmers.
I mean, when it comes to the private schools, sorry, it doesn't even debate. Leave the farmers to one side, let's just leave that there. But the private schools, I'm just like, what, 7% of kids go to private schools. You know, they have been tax exempt. It is, most people would argue, a luxury. You know, I have compassion on kids with special educational needs that may need to go to those schools. But I'm sorry, when you've got schools falling apart and you've got 90% of kids that go to state schools, I don't have a problem. I'm sorry, I just don't have a problem with that.
I think 3,000 state school kids have already... Sorry, 3,000 private school kids have already entered the state sector.
Fine. Yeah, that's fine.
So that's already swallowed up some of that.
Well, let's see the money that we raise from taking away. It's a tax exemption that was there. You know, they're just being taxed the way everyone else is taxed. I haven't got a problem with that. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry.
They're not. They have charitable
status. Sending your kid to a private school is a luxury.
And
it is a luxury.
On the farmers, they think passing your land down to your children is a luxury, but they don't realise.
Well, but I'm saying to you,
let Charlotte finish.
I just think it's that kind of thinking that's been, in the farmers' case, just it's bad thinking, because they're thinking it's a luxury, you know, of course you can find £1 million to pay your tax bill, and it's just not true.
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't compare those two things. Like I say, I feel differently about the private school situation than I do to the farmers, and like I said, it could well be that actually if loads of family farms are going to be hitting that way, I don't think that is a good thing, and I definitely would have compassion on that.
Charlotte, I mean, is the problem with this tax raid on the farmers, I mean, some of it's practical and logistical, but the messaging is not great, is it?
No, not at all. And I think they thought they were closing the loophole for the wealthy farmers, but the messaging isn't good. And what I really think it's about is a genuine lack of understanding of the countryside and how the farming industry works and how important it is to the fabric of our country.
Is it class warfare?
Yes.
Is it sort of student politics?
Definitely student politics, ideological, point scoring, sneering a little bit.
Now, I understand Susie feels quite nuanced about it, and she is right. We are broke. What are the political implications of this battle that the Prime Minister is now embarked on? Will it affect him in 4 years' time? Is there collateral damage from this? Because there aren't that many farmers out there.
No, there aren't, as a proportion of the population, but they're well thought of among the broader population, I think. It's not merely about financials. It's not merely about pounds, shillings and pence, as it were. It's about the fact that this clearly is an attack by the Labour Party on a way of life and the way that the countryside is formed. The British countryside, and particularly the English countryside, would not look the way it is were it not for the farming methods and the families that have been there for generations after generations.
What about the millionaires who do buy up land to benefit from this tax exemption?
Well, frankly, I don't have a problem. It's still being farmed. It's still producing food. And what would you rather it did? Sat there fallow?
They need to find a way to close that loophole without punishing the farmers who aren't multimillionaires. Although they're sitting on millions of pounds worth of land, they actually haven't got much cash in their pocket. Surely Rachel Reeves can find some nuance and find a way to solve that problem.
Is a U-turn coming?
I honestly think he's going to have to do a U-turn. We'll see what happens on Tuesday, but I think, as you say, there aren't that many farmers, but I bet we'll see a lot of people on the streets on Tuesday.
I think what I would say,
farmers.
What I do want to say is I don't think that Keir Starmer is callous. I really don't think they're not trying to attack people in the countryside or farmers. Like, that's just not what's happening here. They're looking at the books, they're looking at the difficult economic situation we're in, and they're trying to find places where they can find money to fund schools and fund hospitals.
Sacred?
Whether or not
was that not sacred?
Whether or not
a 300-year-old family farm?
Whether or not it is the right decision, this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that is the right decision, but I'm saying that's why they've done it. 100%, I'm saying to you, they don't have like something out for farmers. Do you know what I mean? Farmers aren't necessarily middle-class people anyway. A lot of them are working. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know what I would say on that. Is I don't think they've deliberately gone after these people because they've got something against them. I think it is about saying, actually, we need to find the money from somewhere to fund, crucial public services.
OK, well, look, we'll come back to this. Plus, more front pages, including a worrying development reported by the Sun newspaper. A Windsor raid as Wills, Kate and kids slept. A worrying royal development. We'll discuss that next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Wolf Hall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? And are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, same with Anne Boleyn, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who is Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage, because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe, yes. I can't speak for everybody because this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious. But there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Producer Mel is absolutely right. It's time for some emails. gbnews.com/your say. And this from, let's have a look. Oh, yes, Shuti, who says, good evening. The only reason farmers' land is valuable is because what it's worth for housing. To farmers, it's not worth a penny. It's the crops they grow which are worth their income. OK, well, look, I'll get to more of your thoughts on that. Maybe just this one from Alison, who says, we don't want you to say anything else. It's ideology. Look at John McTernan, the former Labour advisor, who said, didn't he, of course, to Patrick Christie's earlier this week, that Labour should do with the farmers what Thatcher did with the coal miners. This will raise hardly anything, especially with succession planning for most, if they have a chance. Thank you for that. Keep those messages coming. Some more front pages are in. We'll start with the Times. Young jobless told to take up training or face losing benefits. Biden will let Ukraine fire long-range US missiles. And Starmer wants to build a new rapport with China. Guardian, Thames Water repairs crisis leaves supply on knife edge. Biden lifts ban on use of US arms in Russia. And PM aims to reset ties with Xi at the G20 summit. And a really worrying story in the Sun newspaper. Gang on royal estate. Windsor raid as Wills, Kate and kids slept. Masked raiders struck on the Windsor Castle estate as the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children slept in their home nearby. The two men scaled a 6-foot fence at night to steal farm vehicles. A source said they must have been watching Windsor Castle for a while. OK, well, let's get reaction to that royal breach from David Oldroyd-Bolt, Charlotte Griffiths and Susie Stride. Charlotte, this is a worrying development, isn't it? You've got Prince and Princess of Wales and their children at the Windsor estate. Meanwhile, a gang there stealing farm equipment.
Yeah, it's so alarming. And Adelaide Cottage, you know, it's actually quite modest. I mean, it's not a cottage, but it is quite a modest house. It's not a big castle.
How does it compare to Frogmore?
I mean, it's bigger than Frogmore. It's bigger than Frogmore, but it doesn't, you know, it's not a castle. So you can imagine if they got close to that cottage, Adelaide Cottage, you know, they could easily have been raided. Their actual house could have been raided. And there are two people that are going to be reading this with extra interest, Prince Andrew and Prince Harry. Prince Andrew lives in Windsor at Royal Lodge, also a huge building that sounds small, but it's not. But he's had his security cut off, £3 million by King Charles, and obviously he's arguing that he still needs it, and this is going to be something that he can put in his back pocket for an argument. And Harry will be thinking the same thing, because Harry hasn't got security. He feels he can't come over to the UK because he doesn't have adequate security, and this is the reason why. Because you know it was just a robber after a tractor in this case, but who knows, next time it could be a murderer.
Yes, because Andrew has secured tenure at the Royal Lodge, hasn't he? Struck a deal regarding his accommodation there.
Yeah.
Sort of for the foreseeable, but not the security.
Not the security, but Charles has cut off his private financing, but he's been able to reassure the keeper of the Privy Purse that he's got enough money to upkeep Royal Lodge. Part of the deal is he has to spend a lot of money every year on keeping it up. And Charles was hoping, apparently, to flush him out by cutting off his sources of income and his security. But he's managed to find the money. But it's a hell of a lot of money, £3 million.
Can you not establish a ring of steel around the Windsor estate? I mean, a 6-foot fence is not that high, is it? I'm 6'5".
There is a ring of steel there.
David, you could climb over me quite easily.
Oh, I'd love to.
Give it time. The night is young.
You probably know quite a lot about this.
I mean, is the expectations too high that somehow you can, you know, make these places, you know, completely sort of secure?
Yeah, I think they're quite sprawling. They're in the countryside. I think we picture Windsor Castle as a bit of a fortress, which it sort of is, but these other satellite buildings around it are, they're very easily visible from the road as well.
So much of Windsor Great Park is open to the public most of the time. You can drive through it.
You see Andrew on his horses a lot, don't you? He's often pictured.
Well, he likes a filly, we know that. Yeah. The Daily Telegraph, Susie, tackle violent crime, not tweets. Starmer urges police.
I'm really glad Keir Starmer has come out and said this, and I just think, I think it shows he's in touch, because this is where people are at. They're like, do you know what? We want our police to police streets. We don't want them to be policing people's opinions. And this infuriated me, but I'm just like, I think it's a disgrace, and it's not just this one journalist. It's happening across the country. People having their doors knocked on at 4 o'clock in the morning because they wrote a tweet. Now, they may have written a slight slightly offensive tweet or whatever it may be. And maybe people, maybe need to be told, OK, whatever. But you can't have police resources going into that when you've got,
no tweet is worse than being mugged at knife point,
well, exactly, exactly.
David, briefly, if you can, The Times, young jobless told to take up training or face losing benefits. What's not to like?
It's a lovely idea, isn't it? And look at the numbers in there when socialists are going on about how buggered the public finances are, forgive my French, and you're looking at the total going on joblessness by the end of this Parliament to £100 billion, which has more than tripled since before the pandemic. I wonder where all this came from. If we need to look at the holes in the public finances, you start with why that is, and the great amount of it is because a huge number of people who stopped working during the pandemic have never gone back.
Let me tell you that Headliners is next in the safe and capable hands of Josh Howie. Hey, Josh, what have you got for us?
We've got some racist rocks, as you do.
Was it dogs? It was dogs yesterday. Now, what? Is like a mountain racist or what?
Everything's racist. It's not The Rock, before he sues us. We have why being trans is going to help you if you're trying to have IVF. We're going to have the news about the missiles being allowed by Biden. We've got Paul Cox and we've got Kerry Marks. They've just come straight from the Magic Mike show. They've been appearing there and they're going to be with us very soon. So stick around.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, thank you to everyone that worked so hard on this show. Mel and Bobby today, Maria yesterday. It's been a brilliant weekend. I always love having your company on the telly, on the radio. This is the job of my life, and I'm back to do it on Friday at 8 o'clock, so be good between now and then. Thanks to the amazing David Oldroyd-Bolt, Charlotte Griffiths and Susie Stride. Folks, please come back soon. You'll look marvellous and made a great contribution to the show. Spoke a lot of sense. Not as much as me, of course, but that's why it's got my name in the title. I'll see you Friday. Have a good week. Headliners is next.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's going to be turning colder for all of us as we head into the new working week with some sleet and snow in the forecast for some of us and plenty of blustery showers around as well. This is all thanks to this area of low pressure that's moving in from the northwest towards the UK as we go through into the start of Monday and Tuesday. Back to this evening though, a bit of a mixed picture across the UK, plenty of cloud, some outbreaks of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across the southern half of the UK, but further north staying a little bit drier. Plenty of clear spells around, some blustery showers across the far north of Scotland. These likely to turn to sleet and snow over the hills, and it'll be a really chilly start to the morning across parts of Scotland, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in places. So this could mean some icy stretches, so do take care during Monday morning's rush hour. But further south, a bit of a milder start to the morning, plenty of showery rain around, this perhaps turning heavy across southwestern parts of England. For Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, generally a bit of a drier start to the day though, some sunny spells as we go through the morning. But for Scotland, despite the bright start, it will be a really chilly start. So do take care if you are on the roads during Monday morning's rush hour, as there could be some ice on some untreated surfaces. Those sleet and snow showers continue to pile in across northern parts of Scotland throughout all of Monday, and that initial area of rain across the southern areas clears away to the south, but this next area of rain arrives across parts of Northern Ireland, most likely falling as rain. But we could see some sleet and snow over the hills as we go through Monday afternoon. Some sunny spells across eastern areas through the afternoon, but feeling really quite chilly here. Temperatures only around 2 or 3 degrees, but just holding on to that milder air further south. To start on Tuesday, we could see some disruptive snow across northern parts of England, most likely falling over high ground, but there is a chance that we could see sleet and snow to lower levels. So do take care if you are out on Tuesday morning. But Tuesday afternoon, there should be plenty of sunny spells around, but still plenty of blustery showers, particularly across the northern half of the UK. And it will be feeling cooler as we go towards the middle part of the week, with temperatures well below average for the time of year.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the Fuck Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
In 2020, after almost 80 years, Oxford University's Pitt Rivers Museum removed its famous collection of shrunken heads with sewn-up lips and eyes made by the South American Shuar and Ashwar people. How do museums decide what should be shown and what should be confined to storage? Can controversial exhibits be left on display with suitable contextualisation in captions? Who would want to be a curator facing such controversial questions? For review, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist Eitan Smallman. Welcome to GB News. I think many people, when they hear that we're going to discuss museums or art galleries, think that it's going to be, that wokery question. But it strikes me, and I think it strikes you too, that this is not just about wokery at all. There are some really interesting ethical questions here. For example, let's start with this one, and there are several examples of it. Should we be displaying human bodies, the remains of human beings? Should we be displaying them in museums?
Absolutely. It's not just the usual suspects, young snowflakes, who are objecting to these things. They're just naturally cultural shifts, and people of all ages and all political persuasions may feel uneasy about displaying human remains of any kind, especially human remains that have been taken against the will of the communities or taken violently. Hilary Mantel led a campaign to remove a 7-foot 7-inch skeleton of Charles Byrne, known as the Irish Giant, from the Hunterian Museum. He had specifically said that he didn't want to be displayed and didn't want to be taken by anatomists, and yet was displayed for a couple of hundred years until a couple of years ago. He hasn't had the burial he requested, but he's no longer on public display.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 11 o'clock, which means it's time for tomorrow's newspapers tonight. Join us over the next hour to find out why are so many asylum seekers into musical theatre? What do trans women and lesbians have in common? And why is The Rock racist? I'm Josh Howie. Tonight's most emotionally unstable headliners are Kerry Marks and Paul Cox. There they are. This is Headliners. But before tomorrow's news, let's go to tonight's headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Josh, thank you and good evening. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom at 11 o'clock. Joe Biden's administration has lifted the ban on Ukraine using US weapons to strike deep inside Russia. It's understood Ukraine plans to conduct its first long-range attacks in the coming days. The US U-turn comes after months of requests by Volodymyr Zelensky to allow Ukraine's military to use US weapons. It's not clear if Donald Trump will reverse Biden's decision when he takes office. Trump has long criticised the scale of US financial and military aid to Ukraine. The Prime Minister has hinted that the UK will start paying countries to do more to stop migrants entering the UK illegally. It comes amid reports the government is expected to announce an Italian-style immigration deal with countries like Kurdistan and Vietnam. The Times reports the Home Secretary is preparing to pay millions of pounds to countries to fund more preventative measures, stopping migrants from journeying to Britain. Despite scrapping the Conservatives' flagship Rwanda plan, Labour is said to be modelling their immigration policy on that of Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's deal with Albania. When asked directly about paying countries to stop migrants leaving their own countries and heading to the UK, Sir Keir Starmer said anything else we can do to stop people leaving in the first place is the right thing. Meanwhile, there are reports that Donald Trump's team are looking at plans to deport illegal migrants to Rwanda. Following the scheme that was drawn up by the Conservative government, the president-elect is reportedly considering a number of different countries to send illegal immigrants to. A source close to Trump's team said he campaigned on a promise to crack down on illegal immigration, and he is determined to stick to it. In other news, an international manhunt is underway for the husband of a woman who was murdered and found in the boot of a car. 24-year-old Harshita Brella was discovered in London last Thursday after police received a call from a member of the public concerned for her welfare. Police are now searching for Harshita's husband, Pankaj Lamba, but he is thought to have fled the country. A mandatory referral has been made to the Independent Office for Police Conduct by Northamptonshire Police because of previous contact with Miss Brella. And some breaking news. Masked men have raided Windsor Castle while Prince William, Princess Catherine and their children were asleep at a home nearby. That's according to reports in the Sun newspaper. 2 men are understood to have scaled a 6-foot fence at night to steal farm vehicles. The thieves used a stolen truck to smash their way through a security gate at the royal estate. They then drove off in a pickup and a quad bike that was stored in a barn. King Charles and Queen Camilla were not in residence, but the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children were at home just 5 minutes away. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's time for Headliners.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to Headliners, your first look at Monday's top stories with 3 comedians. We're going to have a quick taste of what Kerry and Paul will have to deal with on Monday's front pages. The Telegraph, Biden gives green light for strikes in Russia. The Times, Starmer wants to build a new rapport with China. The Eye, move as close as possible to EU in Brexit reset. The Sun, Windsor raids as Will's, Kate and kids slept. The Mirror, manhunt. And the Daily Star, I'm a celeb yeti, get me out of here. Woo! Plenty of news there. Kerry, let's kick off with the Telegraph.
Let's do it. Top news on the
Telegraph. I had a lot of energy there, and I feel like you really went down.
Levels. You want to do it again?
Woo! A lot of news there. Let's go with the Telegraph, Kerry.
OK, then. So, the main headline on the Telegraph is Biden. Do you want me to do it more enthusiastically? All right. Biden gives green light. No, it's not happening. It's not going to happen, Josh. You can keep trying all you like. Biden gives green light for strikes in Russia. So this is basically that Biden has... This is the power of Trump before he even gets in, isn't it, really? They've realised that Trump might stop this, and now Biden is having a last-ditch effort to try and help Ukraine as much as possible by giving them long-range missiles, and apparently he's given them the green light. I didn't know there was a traffic light system, but apparently there's some big green light comes on, so we're fine now. But it's also in response to North Korea, who have joined Russia in the battle. So, of course, now it's being recognised that...
North Koreans.
Sorry?
Up to 100,000 North Koreans.
There's 100,000 of them. That's quite a few. And they've been slowed down a bit by porn, we learned, I think, a week or 2 ago, because they're not used to seeing it. So I think that's what you should do, is drop more porn on them.
Is that true?
Yeah, porn is slowing them down. They've not experienced it before.
Yeah.
So they're having
unbelievable stuff.
It was, yes.
They've probably never seen white women before.
I was going to say no one saw that coming, but I've got to be very careful how I say that on this programme. That's still allowed, right? OK.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's part of the reason. Is it only fair, really, because Paul, with that escalation in terms of what's happened with North Korea, also, if it is coming to an end, the idea is that, Russia's up their game. They are also bombing much deeper into Ukraine than they have been recently. So it's kind of... And also, does it mean that the UK are going to allow our missiles to be used?
Oh, there's so much to unpack here. First of all, I'm not... we have this situation in the States where there's like almost 2 months between a president incoming and a president outgoing. You'd like to think, particularly on massive military stuff, that they'd have some form of alignment. There'd be some generals that are overseeing this. This feels like it's 2 different... We don't know what Trump's going to do. We have an idea.
Well, that's the point, is that Trump's very unpredictable.
Well, that's a good point. It's an aggressive move. Now, it seems an aggressive move to me, at least, in the sense that, how does bombing Russia continue to help the Ukraine? Now, you could argue...
how wars are fought.
Yeah, I would have thought it'd be some help.
But are we not just at a stalemate at the moment anyway? Are we not just reigniting this?
No, we're not. And Russia has made serious advances. And if there is going to be peace in the next year, as Zelensky is saying, then really it's about both of them escalating their game to try and capture as much territory or hold on to as much territory as possible. So when they go into negotiations, one side is in a better position than another.
It's a horrible truth. I think that was the Thatcher thing, wasn't it? That you can only negotiate peace from a position of strength, which seems to be true. I'd like that not to be true.
Yeah,
but it does seem to be the case.
From weakness, but it doesn't happen.
Yes, wouldn't that be good?
Sorry, I just want to go into the other story because this is, I think, very important. Tackle violent crime, not tweets, Starmer urges police.
you want to start on this?
Do you know
or
what?
shall I-
I thought this was fascinating. I heard the previous show talking about this. Obviously, we were reading it ourselves backstage. The idea that Starmer's saying this is fascinating to me because it feels to me like it's the sort of thing he's been encouraging. It feels like it's the philosophy of the Starmer left. However, now we...
You got the evidence for that?
Well,
beyond sending to prison a bunch of people for tweeting.
Yeah, other than all the things that he's done so far. However, he's probably looking at this thinking, the optics are terrible, and B, you cannot keep policing people's words. It's so expensive, particularly when there is so much other stuff going on, you know, burglaries, rapes, murders, all these other things that people really want their politicians and police forces to focus on. I'm sure they're not getting ignored, but it feels, from an optics perspective...
So,
like
Kerry, this is encouraging, right?
I think what happened was he went in so hardline, it's come back and bitten him on the backside with all these silly arrests going on, minor incidents. There's one we'll come to, of course, with Alison Pearson, the Telegraph story and so on. But at the same time, it's not a case of saying that, therefore, ignore all tweets. If a tweet is a threat, and we know of one personally, in our business, of a comedian who carried out an open death threat to a woman.
Jewish woman.
Yes, exactly. And as far as we can tell from it, nothing has been done about that at all.
Still gets
and
booked
yet,
in comedy clubs?
Yeah, right. So it's not a case of don't police tweets. If a tweet is a genuine death threat, then
do something about it.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that this is a sign of the people around Starmer, at least, now listening. And maybe he started watching GB News.
Do you think that's what it is?
I think
we've
he's
changed
watching
his
us, and we've
policies.
convinced him, and he's like, you know what?
Can't see it.
If Josh and Paul and Kerry are talking about it, I better get on top of this now because they've got the pulse.
We've got a lot of power, haven't we?
This is almost certainly happening, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's move on to the Times, Paul.
Yeah, so Starmer wants to build a new rapport with China. China. So this infers that it sort of there wasn't this rapport previously.
No Prime Minister, UK Prime Minister, has met a Chinese leader for 6 years.
That is very true. However, that's because much of the West treats China with scepticism, and rightly so to some degree. They're sort of intellectually, electronically, all sorts of different ways they're our enemy or someone to be sceptical or fearful of in some way. So we have to tread very carefully.
They're not our buddies.
They're not our buddies, and we have to be very careful.
They're not mine.
I'm not sure what he means by rapport. In my mind, I mean, there's sort of some sort of link between Starmer's communism and China's communism, but I'm sure that's entirely untrue.
Starmer's communism? That's such a ridiculous statement. No, there's debate about it when they are going to be the next world superpower. To ignore them is a ridiculous thing. It's got nothing to do with communism.
No, I don't think we should ignore them.
It's to do with the fact that we want to get money from them.
Okay.
If anything, it's capitalism which is driving his desire.
Well, it's certainly driving it. Capitalism pays for everything, doesn't it? Capitalism pays for socialism. Capitalism pays for communism. You can't do anything without capitalism. It's what underpins all of these very left-wing ideas. My point is that we still should treat China with scepticism. And I'm not suggesting we don't have a rapport with him, but I do believe that we have to be careful.
I mean, Kerry, that chair was made in China.
My chair is falling.
It's made in China.
It's the joke chair, isn't it? Whoever
it
gets
might
this...
be that, China controls that chair and it's deliberately sort of...
That's what's going on here.
I heard a news item earlier on today. It was audio, and it said... I turned it on, and it said, she has said he will talk to Trump.
Yeah.
And it took me a moment to realise he must be talking about Xi Jinping, because I was certain it was a trans story, for a moment, but it turned out not to be. Well, look, Starmer's a pragmatist, for all these faults and so on, he is a pragmatist. He'll talk to leaders, whatever their views, spend time over with Maloney and so on. And I think he's right to open talks with Xi Jinping. But, of course, we're wondering what's going on below all this, because, of course, we're looking at the tariffs that Trump might bring in, and now we have to sort of position ourselves to decide whether we're going to tie in with America and push further away from Europe, or what the Labour Party might do is push closer to Europe and closer to China for trade agreements.
I just want to get into bed with everybody.
Tariffs.
That's what I want to do.
Well, you can.
We
can
can
try
story
it.
at the top here. Young jobless told to take up training or face losing benefits, Paul.
Yeah, really interesting. And the sub-story to this is that so many young people are on benefits as a consequence of what happened during the pandemic. A lot of kids didn't rejoin the education system. A lot of kids that maybe were on apprenticeships didn't continue
mental health issues.
Huge mental health
Loads
issues.
of those.
Absolutely.
It's in vogue,
so
isn't
there's
it?
a lot more to this than just kids on benefits. This
is a good thing, right? Surely they should go at least do some training. They shouldn't just be expected to just have handouts, right? There should be some...
I think apprenticeships make a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. And don't forget, just as they were their dying embers of the Tory party, they were talking about national service and so on as well, which seems an extreme move, but of a type where young people can do different types of work and learn skills, I don't think it's a bad thing, actually.
All right, fine. Let's go on to the Daily Express then, Kerry.
OK, then we will do.
Time to take up a new diet?
Labour, war on farmers is threat to food security. So, really, this is talking about whether the farmers decide to strike and refuse us all food, which is possible. But at the moment, they're not claiming they're going to do that. So this isn't like a real threat at this moment.
But I think some people are talking about it.
You are. You just talked about it. I just heard you. Definitely you.
There's definitely a farmer in this article.
Are you a farmer?
Are
you a farmer?
He said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop making food.
When did
and you're all going to
starve. Never used to be like this. There's growing. What farmers are growing at the moment is disgruntlement at the government, and the government paid out the train drivers, and they said we need to get the country moving. That's the priority. The question is whether they will take the same approach with the farmers, which it doesn't look like at the moment they're going to, because they're saying no, we're not particularly interested, and that whether we're going to end up on a very short food supply with something. They're saying something similar to the early pandemic when everyone, for a little while, everyone was saying it's like wartime because we couldn't buy toilet paper for about 3 days.
Well, that's it. Are the farmers going to grow toilet paper?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they grow in the UK. Is it turnips?
We grow lots of things in the UK. Lots of vegetables,
avocados,
fruits,
that's all I care about.
Grapes.
We
grow sheeps.
We grow sheep, do we?
We grow cows. You see them all over. Don't tell me we don't. I see them all over the field.
We've got another story coming up, though. But yeah, this is slightly concerning. Like you say, they haven't pinpointed exactly which farmer. It just says some farmers are threatening to go on strike. The irony would be that if you could, because they're essentially self-employed like we are, if they're rich enough to be able to go on strike and not earn money, then they're probably rich enough to pay the tax.
Well, again, I would argue the same as I did when the nurses were on strike, that these are a critical service to the UK, and I wouldn't want to see the farmers go on strike. I mean, I support their cause entirely with regards to the inheritance tax, but I wouldn't want to see farmers go on strike in the same way as I didn't want to see nurses go on strike. I think it's not that I don't believe in striking and the freedom to be able to, challenge the man, and they do have huge problems here. But I think they're a very critical service, the farmers, and we can't do without food. I can't do without food.
Yeah, this is a very personal story. What's The Guardian going with then, Paul?
So The Guardian, Thames Water repairs crisis leaves supply on knife edge. So this is The Guardian snooping around once again. But they've discovered that...
like a newspaper,
they live in
like
London.
journalists.
It's kind of their job, really, isn't it?
Stories.
I'm even criticising The Guardian for actually writing stories now. But they're saying that they've got £23 billion of assets that are in urgent need of repair. They've got IT systems that date back to 1989. They've got all sorts of unrest amongst their people. Interestingly, the water company, Thames Water, made £157 million in profit last year, but that's not a big profit, not really. And I looked a little bit further, and they say they've got £1.8 billion worth of cash in the business that will see them through to the spring of 2025. Well, if it takes £2 billion to keep your business afloat for 6 months of the year, if your profit is 160 million, I'm not sure how they continue to go.
But what you're not factoring in is all the dividends that they've been paying out, the billions of dividends they paid out to their foreign investors as well. So this money has just been taken out of the UK, not put into what was needed, and now taxpayers are going to pick up the bill.
Yes, and they've been taking all kinds of cuts in their operations and so on, and of course we had all the scandal of the amount of poo going into our water in the rivers and so on.
Yummy.
I don't think particularly a good look for Thames Water. I did mention on this programme, I think I mentioned on this programme some ages ago when I saw a Thames Water van pull out outside my house, and 4 members of their staff got out drinking Evian. And I thought that was or is it Evian, whatever you pronounce it, what a terrible advert that was. Yeah, I mean, give us water.
We need water, right.
We need water.
That's all the front pages. Plenty more stories still to come. Who is Nigel Farage taking to court? Who might farmers not want support from? And why are so many asylum seekers going to Pride? This is Headliners, only on GB News.
is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Love a bit of baking and share some hot tips. We're delighted to be joined by our baking extraordinaire, Matty Edgell, who won Great British Bake Off last year.
Woo!
Welcome. Congratulations as well. I'm sure you're sick of being congratulated.
And there's a reminder.
No, you like all the glory.
Yeah. What was it like winning the Great British Bake Off? What's last year been like for you?
Winning it was I was not expecting to win at any point until they said my name.
You're a very
it was a nice
guy.
surprise. No, I'm just
really
in touch with reality. I wasn't.
Was it quite a close race throughout then?
Yeah, I considered myself the underdog throughout. I think the first week I turned around after the showstopper and kind of saw how good everyone was, and then looked at mine and thought, how have I got here? And that kind of theme followed through.
But then that surely like an underdog. You on.
Yeah, it did.
Actually, I'm going to get better throughout this.
Yeah, I think it made me kind of like really tune into the feedback that they was giving me and trying to embed that throughout. So that's probably why.
Could you feel yourself improving as the series went on?
Definitely, and I think also, like, kind of simultaneously, my confidence improved at the same time, and then that, like, little bit of belief in myself probably helped out as well.
What was your strength? Biscuits, cake, bread?
I think cake's my strength.
Cake.
I think cake, typically, if you start baking, that's probably where you start, isn't it? So that was what I knew most.
How did you start baking?
I've been asked this so many times since...
You don't know?
I attribute it to my nan.
Sweet.
But, yeah, I would say... I think most people probably attribute it to like a grandparent or something that they maybe done with like their parents when they was growing up. So I'll give it to my nan.
Or the major lockdown